So, good evening, everyone. Good evening for those connected from Italy, Europe, and American countries. Good morning for those connected from America. Tonight, we have the inaugural meeting of the Global Expert Talks, an initiative, a new format that Uniparthenope has developed together with MIT Sloan, in particular MIT Sloan Global Program Organization. And before getting into the presentation of tonight's event and present also our guests, knowledgeable guests, let me just do a short presentation of what is the collaboration that we have set up with MIT Sloan. In particular, this initiative dates back to the early 90s when I was a student at MIT Sloan, but later on, with the support of my colleagues, this collaboration has become more and more intense with the initiatives that have brought us to signing a strategic agreement with the MIT Sloan within the MIT Global Programs framework. And this initiative, this strategic agreement, umbrella agreement, contains several items. The first and most relevant one for us is a master program on entrepreneurship and innovation, which has started this year, its second edition, and the students are connected tonight with us. The main program is a program that includes a period of experience in the Cambridge ecosystems for our students coming from Italy, and then an exchange of MIT professors who come and join the Italian faculty here in Napoli. The agreement includes, in addition to the main program, also an exchange program for young researchers. We have at least two of our researchers joining MIT faculty to grow and develop the research programs together with Sloan and MIT Sloan faculty. And of course, we have the Global Talk initiative that this evening starts for the first time. What are these Global Talks? Global Talks are a format, a digital format, where we connect global experts with national leaders, Italian leaders, on hot topics, topics that regard mainly business and innovation. The goal of this initiative is to build a community of international experts and Italian leaders in business innovation, and of course to strengthen the awareness of our Uniparthenope and main master program as well. So the idea is to put together all these elements together. The target is represented by entrepreneurs, managers, consultants, faculty, PhD students, master students. That's the target of these global expert talks that we have started. So now let me go inside the first global expert talk that is tonight devoted to the future of digital platforms. Tonight we have two incredible guests, Michael Cusumano from MIT Sloan and Riccardo Monti, executive chairman of Triboo Group. Who is Michael Cusumano? Most of us know him. We were students. Michael is a SRM distinguished professor of MIT Sloan, as well as deputy dean of this university. He is the one who started the concept, the modern concept of platform, starting from the automobile industry and the software industry as well. He is also an incredible expert in the Japanese economy. He has founded for University of Tokyo the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center of University of Tokyo. He visited for many years Itsubashi University, and I would say that he has visited. I mean, it's a long list to mention. He, as I mentioned before, introduced for the first time the concept of platform economy, starting from industrial platforms, moving along the years to the digital world. He has written many books. He has published in the top scientific journal. And his last book, which is a bestseller, as the title of The Business Platforms, Strategy, the Edge of Digital Competition, Innovation and Power, 2019 or 20, I don't remember exactly. Then we have our Italian leader, Riccardo Monti. Riccardo Monti, I know him since university times. Riccardo is a manager, a serial entrepreneur. He started after school and then he joined a spin-off from McKinsey and Company, which was Value Partners, becoming partner of Value Partners and bringing this company at international level to open 16 offices worldwide and becoming a leader in Latin America as a consulting firm. Then he took care of the sale of the company. He then worked also for the Italian government. In particular, he was the president of Italian Trade Commission, the main organization which supports Italian companies to develop business abroad. Then he was chairman of the board of the Italian largest engineering company, 1 billion company, Italfer, and he's currently executive chairman of Triboo Group, a company that uses the value of digital platforms for its clients. Then we will tell about. It will tell us more about that. I don't mention also his entrepreneurship career because it would take too much time. So let's give the floor to Michael. I would start with a very simple question, Michael. What do you see in the future of the economy in terms of platform? What will happen with these giga platforms? Will all of them be successful? So I will shut down myself and give the floor to you, and then Riccardo will join the discussion later on. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Hey, well, thank you, Marco. So I'm going to back up a bit and give some definitions so we are all talking about the same thing, and then I'll get to the question of what do I see happening with the future of platforms. So maybe the biggest problem we face is that platforms are both exciting as a business phenomena, but they've also taken on somewhat of a bad reputation. So there's good and there's bad, and then there's some uncertainty. But basically, when we talk about a digital platform, we're talking about some industry-wide technology or service that many individuals or companies have adopted. And what the platform does is it brings together, as we say, key market participants, buyers and sellers, for example, or innovators and users. And in the process of bringing those different market sides, we say, together, a platform can generate network effects. And a network effect is a positive feedback loop where users of the platform continually benefit as there are more users added to it or more third-party complementary innovations like applications or services that are accessible through a personal computer or a smartphone. Okay, so we have these very powerful negative or positive feedback loops. Sometimes they can become negative as well if a platform becomes out of favor, like happened to BlackBerry, for example, with phones, or if it becomes out of favor, let's say, with a fintech platform like crypto. So there are positive and negative elements. The other negative element, I would say, is that we've had trouble figuring out how to regulate these platforms. So one of the contributions that I've made in my work, going back to the 1990s and early 2000s, is defining what platforms are. And today, particularly in my last book, The Business of Platforms, we talk about two different types of platforms. And I think Riccardo will also talk about these. But the original type I wrote about, we call innovation platforms. And these are like operating systems or personal computers. They could be also key subsystems, even in an automobile. But their purpose is to encourage outside innovation or third-party companies contributing their own products and services, utilizing some features in that core product or technology. And again, the whole ecosystem makes the platform increasingly valuable as more users, or what we say complementers, participate. The second type of platform we talk about are transaction platforms. And these are largely marketplaces for information or ideas or buying and selling or renting, exchanging information or messages. So social media and e-commerce all fit into that. We've seen these kinds of platforms, both on the innovation or transaction side, become the world's first trillion-dollar businesses. And so they've generated incredible wealth. When we did a study of maybe why are they becoming so valuable, it relates to the potential exponential growth that these platforms can attract, and that is related to network effects. Like even with social media, it's easy to understand. Friends bring in their friends and friends of friends and friends of friends. So we have this kind of growth. And the actual businesses, as we've studied them, are actually very efficient. So if you can become a successful publicly listed platform company, it's likely that you will be 3 times as valuable as a standalone product or service company in the same space. You're likely to have half the number of employees to generate the same amount of revenues. You're likely to be twice as profitable. And so there's a good reason why investors and entrepreneurs and managers have tried to create platform companies. Everyone's looking for the next Apple, the next Microsoft, the next Amazon. On the negative side, though, every major platform company has been the target of antitrust investigation. Network effects tend to lead these companies to be very big and powerful and to basically crowd out competition. There's abuse of power, abuse of information. We've seen that happen with Facebook, for example. We have the chaos with Twitter going on now. Many platform companies develop an advantage because they don't quite fit into the normal industry or sector rules. For example, is Airbnb a hotel company? Is Uber a taxi cab company? Is Amazon a department store? Are crypto exchanges or fintech exchanges, are they financial services companies or not? And many of these businesses have not been regulated or taxed in a normal way. And they've also had labor issues, not treating their workers as full employees, and so they pay less costs, for example. So the regulation has started to catch up with these kinds of sector differences. And so in the future, we may actually see a more level playing field between the digital platforms and the traditional businesses. Another phenomena that I've written about, I call it platform mania, that we see entrepreneurs and managers creating platforms in almost every type of market, and also trying to encourage outside or open innovation in many different products and technologies. You know, who thought the taxi industry would become a digital platform, or the hotel industry? And as we've also seen, though, just creating a platform doesn't make your business profitable. A platform needs to be solving some kind of a market failure problem where 2 sides are not reaching each other, or simply selling a standalone product or service is not working properly. So platforms really need to be like other businesses in that they're solving some kind of market failure problem, and they're creating special value through the networks that they create as they link different market participants. And that's where the special value of network effects comes in. Okay, so all this is background. And so going forward, we're definitely seeing a different regulatory environment for the existing platform companies that have come about, whether they're software businesses or search businesses or e-commerce, fintech platforms, digital content, app stores. Right now, for example, the concept of an app store, which Apple made particularly famous from 2008, is being challenged as a kind of a monopolistic access point or control point to an a widely adopted platform, which would be the iPhone and, of course, related devices like the iPad. So that's being challenged in courts, largely because it's not only the one access point, but Apple also prevents companies from doing business within their applications if they're not charging through the App Store and giving Apple 30% of the revenues, for example. So we have these kinds of challenges going on. So on my end and with my research group, we've been looking at how new technologies are also leading to new types of innovation platforms or new types of transaction platforms. And with a lot of the newer technologies, we don't yet have a clear idea of what the regulatory problems will be, or even what the business model challenges will be. But that's one of our thoughts, that almost every new technology will lead to new types of platforms. So, for example, we have artificial intelligence and machine learning. We have Internet of Things, of course. We have big data. We have quantum computing, quantum communications, and even biotechnology. These are some of the areas that we wrote about in the Business of Platforms book, and I continue to study them. We try to make some distinctions between what we call enabling technologies and actual platforms themselves. So, for example, peer-to-peer technologies like blockchain. It's not a platform in and of itself, but it can support different platforms that we have not seen before. So one of them was, for example, cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, which has exploded in popularity and now is exploding downward in value. So one of the most valuable, essentially, platform businesses, in the sense it's linking people that want to buy cryptocurrencies and people that want to sell cryptocurrencies, the FTX exchange. So just like crypto exploded in popularity, it's also collapsing in value. So from $32 billion in value just a few weeks ago, that platform company is probably worth zero. So that's what can happen with some of these platform businesses, but most of them are actually quite stable, interesting companies. They're not all profitable. We find that getting a platform business started can often take a lot of subsidies because you have two sides at least involved, and usually one of those sides has to have free access or subsidized access, and that can often cost a lot of money. Uber, for example, is a pretty it's a very popular platform and it's a very convenient service. But it's a terrible business model for a platform because it has to subsidize both of its two sides. It has drivers and then it has riders. And if you look carefully at why it's cost them so many billions of dollars, even after 12, 13 years of being in operation, they still lose multiple $billion a year. It's because they have to pay drivers even when they're not driving, and they have to continually discount the service for riders. Even just this morning, I got a coupon for a free meal if I use Uber Eats for my delivery. So the bigger Uber gets, the more money it loses. And that's a bad example of a platform. Whereas a company like Airbnb, another type of transaction platform, it charges both renters and people that have assets to rent. So it makes money on both sides of the platform rather than loses money on both sides of the platform. In the cases where it loses money, it's because problems with COVID, for example, or people just not traveling and competition from hotels. Okay, so we have some of these issues that platform companies still need to sort out, but we see some interesting platforms happening that I've been studying. So one is around self-driving vehicles or at least automated vehicles, driving services like Waymo or Mobileye has started in Israel and a couple other places. So it's possible that instead of Uber, we will have, at least for dedicated routes, we will have vehicles that will be automated. And so there are companies that are building not only platform businesses to control access to this service, but that will also manage ownership of the vehicles, that will also manage ownership of the data to train the vehicles, both for navigation or for insurance purposes or communications purposes. So I've been looking a lot at data platform network effects. Another new platform I've been looking at is in communications and cybersecurity related to quantum computing or quantum mechanics. So quantum computing itself is a new innovation platform with new kinds of applications, new kinds of hardware platforms. It's probably about 15 years away from being commercially used on a fairly wide scale for certain kinds of problems. Within the next 5 to 10 years, though, we'll see a number of more common applications for simulation or certain kinds of number crunching problems. We also have quantum communications platforms and possible transaction services that are being developed for cryptography, for secure communications, actually using quantum information to encrypt messages over fiber optic lines. And again, I'm pretty interested in how that new type of platform will evolve. One other platform that I've been studying and we wrote a little bit about in our book relates to biotech. That the biotech industry, it has become in many ways an information technology industry. And you can think of DNA as basically an information technology. And over the past 20 years, we've seen a lot of computer scientists be brought into the biotech field and biologists trained in programming and computer science. And certain diseases can be tackled as if there are common platforms or chunks of DNA or particular proteins that are either related to the cause of disease or the solutions to the disease, like vaccines. So one of the reasons we were able to develop the mRNA vaccines so quickly is that a number of biotech companies had taken this kind of platform approach to understanding common causes to these viruses, this whole family of coronaviruses, and how to develop vaccines for them. So we think there are kind of platform approaches that are useful here. And these are more like automobile platforms where you have common technologies being used for a family of products and services. But the network effects idea comes in when we have multiple companies at least sharing the basic science, and where we have multiple companies developing toolkits. You've heard of maybe CRISPR for gene editing, as well as some other diagnostic tools. And so the more companies that develop some of these complementary technologies around some of these core DNA or RNA platform clusters, we actually have things that look like network effects in the information technology industry. So I've been excited about that and been working with the MIT, one of the MIT centers here on biomedical innovation. And we've also been concerned, though, that biotech is not really an open innovation environment like information technology has been. It's been this kind of zero-sum game where pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies compete to file patents and capture a monopoly over a new drug. So it's more difficult to get some of these companies to share and think of more open platforms. But we saw some open licensing with the vaccines, for example, and that was interesting. So in the long run, I'm hoping to see different kinds of innovation and transaction platforms inspired by a whole range of new technologies. Each of these will have some negative elements to them. We haven't figured out the regulation side. There's going to be monopolies because that's kind of what platforms do. But there should be lots of opportunities for entrepreneurs and investors and other traditional companies. And it's kind of an exciting world. So I'm curious to see how Riccardo responds to these comments, because he's actually utilizing some of these concepts in the everyday world. And I'm kind of working in the present, but also looking forward 5 to 10 to 15 years as to what are the next platforms coming down the road. Okay, but I think I've given you an overview of how I'm thinking about the future just a bit.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. And there have been many interesting, especially in the end for me, the idea of the biotech industry as a potential platform. Maybe also the idea of making open access to knowledge regarding DNA developed all these probably in the last 20 or 30 years after Bill Clinton, I remember.
Right.
Free.
And on that, let me add one more thing. And I started with this 22 years ago, where a biotech entrepreneur read a book I wrote called Competing on Internet Time. And he came to me and said he wanted to create kind of an open operating system for the human genome. This was a guy, Jonathan Rothenberg, and he had created a company called Curagen that was later bought by a big biotech firm. But the human genome project was an open source project in the United States. And that information led to the creation of many biotech companies. So it was a combination of shared open information in an open platform like open source software technologies with private information and the combination. So I've been seeing this happen over the last 20 years. And hopefully we'll see more of that kind of sharing.
Thank you, Michael. So before giving the floor to Riccardo Monti, I want just to mention that if you have questions, please send them to me or to us, and I will share with our guests. Riccardo.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very happy and honored to be in this panel with you. As I told you 30 years ago, I started the automotive industry, and your books were by far the real reference, the most interesting, the most compelling, the most complete analysis of the big picture of the platform, the physical platform that would fit in the Japanese then competitive advantage in the automotive industry. So I'm very, very happy to have the chance to talk to you and to discuss in this webinar about platform. First of all, the key message I would like to vehicle. And we are a very strange company because we're at the same time a media company, we're publishers, and we use the content and the community around the content to feed into a digital marketing business and e-commerce business. So we have e-commerce, digital marketing, and a media company. So we're a small conglomerate. We really face every day the massive complexity that these multiple platforms generate for ourselves as citizen, for ourselves as professional, and for ourselves as a commercial enterprise. Of course, one of the things I really like most of the work of Michael Cusumano is the semantic of the definition of the different platform. Of course, we work more with the transactional platform, which itself is a world, because there's a lot of different word in this transactional platform, because there's the social media platform, there's the purely e-commerce, there is the sharing economy. Uber is a word by itself. You think about some of the platforms that were born as strictly transactional, Amazon or Alibaba. Amazon and Alibaba were born to sell something specific. Amazon, they started selling DVD and books. And now Amazon is all world. And if you're a company that is selling its own food or its own, whatever, sport equipment, you will sell it in your own website, which we call in our jargon the flagship. If your Decathlon is decathlon.com, then there's other retailers, then you have Amazon, and you have to handle the complexity. And within Amazon, you have to promote the product, you have to invest in advertising within Amazon. Alibaba is the same. This ecosystem, there are millions and millions of vendors on some of these purely commerce platforms, not to mention the social media platform that are attacking the e-commerce platform, because now if you go on Instagram, you can buy everything you want in the world on Instagram. And also the other platform like video game, like Sony, Nintendo, they build their own e-commerce within the gaming industry, and they build their own social media. So everybody is attacking each other, but the complexity is really the first message I want to vehicle. Mm-hmm. If you work on platform, you will be working in a very complex, a very crowded, and very fast-moving environment. So this is the first message I'd like to vehicle. Of course, we're seeing on a day-to-day work something very interesting. Out of the last few months, we've seen, for example, first time since the digital platform has exploded, for the first time is over 10 years, 12, 15 years, we've seen inflation. We saw inflation coming from the real world to the digital world. In the past, brands were somehow protected. You could defend there was some brand protection. Now there's traffic and everybody's bidding for a platform and for this traffic. So even if you're a very big brand, somebody will outbid you on traffic and you will lose all of a sudden a lot of traffic on some of these platforms. The retargeting and the cookie policy, they're creating a lot of change. I don't want to go too technical, but the concept is we are seeing a lot of discontinuity and a lot of change in this context. And for example, there are some clear winners. Just a couple examples. TikTok has been doing a hell of a job in building qualified traffic. Till 1 or 2 years ago was just like kids entertainment. Now they're building massive amount of qualified traffic and building a lot of revenue from advertising, digital marketing. Till 1.5 years ago was nothing. You know why they're doing that? Because TikTok is the platform of choice from the Chinese government to be the first $1 trillion company from China. Michael mentioned, the $1 trillion company, Google, Apple, and Facebook. They have a value that is more than the GDP of a rich country. Apple has outpaced the GDP of Italy, which is a big country, 60 million people. Not a big country, but they're like established a relatively rich country. And now we're seeing TikTok becoming the big winner. The other big player of the Chinese ecosystem, by the way, the Chinese world has been the first one to transform this digital platform into full world. WeChat is a world in itself. Weibo is a word in itself, although they became controversial because Weibo was somehow building up free speech. People were complaining. Alibaba was becoming too rich. So now all the fish from the Chinese government go on TikTok. And in the last year, both Alibaba and WeChat sort of stay calm because they were too big. They were competing with the Chinese bank, which are all state-owned. So they were creating a very severe crack in the financial system of China. So these platforms are so big and so powerful. And then I go on the downside. They are more rich than the government. They're more powerful, but they're very little accountable. So I don't want to jump into the political side. I also want to mention the impact on our life as citizens of this platform. this algorithm, the self-selection, the profiling. If you profile precisely someone, it's very easy to make him believe whatever you want him to believe. So the impact of the social media, the digital platform on politics has been polarization. You believe A, you get reinforced and bombed on A, and you get super A, you get fanatic on A, and you get more radical. The US politics is the social the extreme side of the political spectrum and make it build a number of citizens into hardliners and fanatics and becoming so polarized that they wouldn't even talk to people voting for the other party. So this is a very worrying element. There's also some other interesting element. For example, Pinterest, a new platform, is a very feminine platform. It's a platform that is very think about if you have an image or an idea, everything related to the idea. So it's somehow a semantic search meets social media. Again, it's very new, and advertiser and company are running there, especially again, and company cater to, and they're very successful. Some of the big mega platforms like Facebook are facing really hard time because they wanted to do everything. They want to be everywhere, everything for everybody, and also maybe the bet on metaverse was a bit early. I mean, you can be wrong by being too early to the party or a bit too late to the party. Probably the meta bet was a bit too early to. Another element that is linked to the complexity of this social platform is the fact that Michael was mentioning the network effect. So going from a regular growth to exponential growth. This is linked to almost the gravity effect of the black hole. It's so big that everybody gets attracted there. So the question mark is who's going to stop this effect to become an immense monopoly. There's been talk about breaking up Amazon. If you speak to retailers, they're very worried about Amazon because one of the concepts that Michael Cusumano has been studying is the multi-homing. Once you're at home into the Amazon system, we all get lazy. It's so simple. It's so cost-effective. You stay with Amazon. And so what retailers say that with Amazon, the final client wins, Amazon wins, and everybody in the middle loses, okay? If you're a retailer that you choose your coffee or your pasta or wherever on Amazon, you are faced between a rock and a hard place, as they say in America. Either you give up a very important market share, because if you're not there, you're going to lose millions and millions or hundreds of millions of sales. But guess what? On those sales, you tend to make no penny. You have no profit. You just buy market share. If you don't get it, someone else will get it. You get smaller, you will lose. So they call it, not my statement, a necessary evil. You have to be on Amazon. You have to play Amazon games. So the future of platform, what is the future of platform? Of course, nobody knows. But if I see the network effect with the humongous power of the enabling technology that we were mentioning, quantum computing, I add the 5G with a lot of capability of, the possibility of really huge connectivity on with artificial intelligence, with IoT, so Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 5G, quantum computing, and maybe even blockchain, this will make an acceleration. So today what's happening is that the limit to the monopoly is each other, because Facebook is stepping into Google shoes, and Alibaba and WeChat compete on payment system, and so on and so forth. And some other platform like Yandex, very good, very performing Russian-speaking platform. It's a very good social media. It's a very good information tool. Very good e-commerce. It's a very transaction. So it's at the same time somehow Google, Facebook, and Amazon. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure the government will be able to stop it with regulation, because this company tend to be always one step ahead. They have a lot of resource, they have power, they have technology, and it's very difficult for regulation to stop them. So basically, one of the possibility of the future scenario, and I want to hear Michael's opinion, is somehow they stop each other. They're all very big. They're all doing more things because they need growth. Once you're a $2 trillion company, which means that in your stock market evaluation, you embed a huge growth, and you're already a massive market share. Where do you go? You go into self-driving car. You go into each other step. You go into entertainment. So basically, the limit to this massive mega platform is each other, because each other have to grow to justify these huge market back caps. Because if you are already trading 100 times expected earnings for next 2 years, or 200 times, or you're trading at 20 times revenue, the embedded expectation of growth is huge, and you have to go after the growth. Otherwise, happens what we're seeing now, a sudden collapse in the market cap, which is making this platform finally a bit weaker. For the first time, Google, Facebook are firing people, was unthinkable of not 10 years ago, but 10 months ago. So this is all moving very fast. That is why I want to use the massive, powerful brain of Michael Cusumano to assess what's going to happen, who will stop and how will stop this black hole monopoly effect of this mega platform.
Okay.
Thank you, Riccardo. Man, there are many issues, from more industrial issues to also political ones, or competition-based topics. And somehow you touched one of the questions that has also come from the audience. The question was, when a platform becomes giga, which risks will it run? You mentioned, the problem of the antitrust. Both of you have mentioned it. Are there any specific related to the size of a platform? So they can at some point disappear, or do they become stronger and stronger?
So yes, I see that in the chat, and also Riccardo brought this up. So it's interesting. Amazon's an interesting case. In my book, we refer to Amazon as a digital conglomerate, and a conglomerate, right, is a mix of unrelated businesses. Although at the core, there's usually relationship, right? So Amazon started not as a platform, but as an online bookstore, right? And 5 years after it opened, 5 or 6 years,
came a long way.
5 years after it opened, it started a marketplace. Rather than just buy and resell books and electronic products, it started just linking buyers and sellers, and it charged the fees in the intermediate. And then it started selling excess computing services. So we know Amazon makes most of its profit, let's say 60% of its profit, just from web services, Amazon Web Services, and that's only maybe 15% of its revenue. And so that's like the golden goose that lets it keep expanding into all different businesses and make different acquisitions. So, there's almost no limit to what a digital conglomerate could do, because everything is digital these days at some level, right? So Amazon is not building, let's say, medical research centers, but it's very deeply into healthcare and trying to manage healthcare services through digital technology, or pharmaceuticals, trying to take over the pharmaceutical business for individual consumers, buying and selling of pharmaceuticals. So, when you think about it this way, we're kind of in trouble. However, I have a long memory, and I've been at this a long time. So when I first started writing about these, what we now call digital platforms in the 1990s, people were very afraid that Microsoft would dominate the world, that everything would be on the desktop, personal computer. Microsoft had Windows, it had Office, it had a dozen other applications, and it would control the world. Now, Microsoft did become a $1 trillion company, but it really only controls a fairly small part of the digital world, as the digital world has exploded into just about everything. Later in the 2000s, we thought Google would control everything. Now we think kind of Amazon will control many things. But government has stepped in. Regulation has been effective. I think government regulators did stop Microsoft from being overly aggressive. If you remember, they lost an antitrust trial. They were supposed to be broken up, but on appeal, they managed to stay together. Apple is very powerful, but it's in a fairly narrow domain. So I actually have some faith that the regulators will catch up, and they will figure out ways of controlling the worst excess. But the regulators may be 10 years behind reality. So there's going to be decades where we do see these companies create these powerful monopolies. Riccardo, you brought up another great point, which is China. And of course, China has kind of walled off its own internet. And so companies that could have been global platforms have been kind of reined in by the Chinese government. They're still very powerful. We write a lot about WeChat, which is owned by Tencent. So WeChat just started as a simple messaging platform, but so there's a transaction platform, but it becomes very complex. As you suggested, it also becomes an innovation platform. There's millions of applications that run on WeChat, and it's become a payment platform, a travel site, a gaming site, e-commerce site, as well as a basic messaging site. And the Chinese government has become afraid of these particular platforms, Tencent and Alibaba, which are families of platforms. They're also digital conglomerates, and has reined them in. So, I guess the worst part would be if customers were suffering. And in the United States, our regulation tends to look at customers or harm to users, but users often get these services for free. So they're not directly harmed. What is harmed is competition, right? So Google or Amazon will push out the competitors. And so in the long run, customers have fewer choices. And so then you could argue they're being harmed, and maybe theoretically they'll pay more. So that's the new kind of argument that regulators in the US have been using. We've been learning from the Europeans, actually, which we think the European community and the UK are far ahead of the United States in figuring out how to regulate these digital conglomerates. And that's because most of them are American, and it's like World War III with Europe being attacked by these American giants, and where the Americans just kind of let the business flow. But the Chinese have figured out how to regulate them, so have the Europeans, and the US government is trailing along. So I think the worst of some of these digital platforms will be controlled. And we're seeing the crypto platforms, the fintech platforms right now, they haven't been regulated as financial services firms. So here, as we get into some of the issues of, like decentralized finance, I see that also in the chat. Yeah, people thought decentralized finance is a wonderful thing. Everybody exchanges money and goods peer-to-peer. We don't need banks. We don't need intermediaries. We don't need regulators. But, there's some value in having centralized regulation and control, right? And that's establishing value, establishing rules, protecting consumers. And if you have this chaotic world where everything is peer-to-peer or machine-to-machine, you have no one protecting the individual. And so you have Ponzi schemes, and you have other kinds of musical chair schemes, which have happened with crypto. Crypto, by the way, is not a currency. It never has been a currency. It's a digital asset whose only value comes from speculation. It has no government backing, for example, like the U.S. currency or the euro. And so it's a scam. And who wants to hide from the government? It's people, buying drugs or buying arms or sending terrorist money. And so crypto has been a platform for speculators and also criminals. And finally, the government is catching up with it. So, that's one of the bad things. And also some communication platforms have also been used by criminals and terrorists, right? WhatsApp, everything is encrypted. So, we have to live with the good and the bad. And the bigger platforms keep getting bigger. That is part of the black hole of network effects, and they're going to crowd out competitors. So ultimately, in some recent work I've been doing, and to some extent in our last book, we kind of argue that platforms, first, governments will figure out how to regulate the worst of these behaviors because they've done it for the past 150 years with other technologies, other businesses, maybe the last 2,000 years if we go back to the Roman Empire. But companies have to regulate themselves because there's what we call a kind of a tragedy of the commons kind of problem going on here. All of these companies benefit from the open internet and the open access that we have. But if they manipulate that common asset for their own purposes and harm others, ultimately they're going to harm the common asset. And so this wonderful environment that we have with digital technology, open internet, it could be destroyed and regulated to the point where it's not useful anymore. We don't have network effects. What we have is suppression of the network and control of the network. And so for their own self-preservation, we argue that these powerful giant platform companies need to figure out their own limits, their own benefits, and find a way to live with regulators or help regulators. We can't really trust them completely, but we can trust self-interest, because if they destroy the internet and the openness of the internet, they destroy themselves, right? So it's self-interest that we're hoping will kick in with regulation. So it's a huge, complicated issue, and I thank you, Riccardo, for kind of highlighting the complexity of it. I just tried to have a few simple comments, but it really is far more complicated and penetrates almost every aspect of our personal and professional lives.
Riccardo.
Yeah, just a couple comments to add. On the positive, the future, what is the future? One thing that I'm seeing more and more, especially in young people, is let's not forget that we are giving to this platform the value, especially the content-based platform. Why Facebook is worth trillions? Because we give them our information, our comment, our pictures, our family story. So young people have a very clear sense that they are not free. It's just we are the product, so we are providing the product. And actually, some people are now starting to making the concept of rewarding the clients and the user for the time they spend on the platform. Because at the end of the day, we are the value, we as final user. So one element to limit this massive power is the awareness. I mentioned that this giant have very limited accountability. And as you say, properly, government are many years behind. And the very process of antitrust law is so slow, it's so cumbersome, that it is always not one step ahead, but 100 steps ahead. So I believe that the threat of regulation and antitrust will sort of curb their action. I don't believe that actual regulation and actual antitrust law will break them in pieces. But the threat of this is a good factor. And the other factor is people awareness. People awareness that the value is us, our content, our information, our ideas. And for young people, this is really common. My generation, oh, cool, it's free, we don't pay for it. Young people understand very well that they are paying because they're spending a lot of their time, they're providing a lot of the content, there's people making money out of this content. So there's a sort of democracy of the content, and people are also looking at platforms that are more democratic, Be Real. It's like platforms that are not bringing all the value to the end of the mega platform. And one other comment is censorship. Censorship is a temptation that is always there with government. Of course, more democratic government take it with a pinch of salt. Less democratic government think they have the solution with censorship. But also, one of the way that government can use to rein in this platform is some sort of censorship, which of course I don't agree, and I think is definitely one of the factors that can generate some sort of limitation to the action of this mega platform. But definitely it's going to be interesting time ahead of us. We have a lot of thing happening, and the whole world is on this platform. We have 5 or 6 billion user of digital, of web, on social media, on messaging platforms. So basically now almost 80% of humanity is on this platform. And of course, nobody knows what's the direction, but we're definitely going to leave some interesting time in the next 3 or 4 years with this effect of picking up of the enabling technology to even more accelerating the capability of this platform to generate new idea, new companies, new business for existing company, and also even transactional platform are becoming innovation generating platform, because basically on the transaction platform we see every week 100 new companies that just come out of this transaction platform, and they start doing their business and generate new ideas and a lot of innovation from every corner of the globe. In the last 12 months, India has generated 30 unicorns. So India is probably the big winner in the next 2 or 3 years, because there's a lot of very smart people. The 1.3 billion citizens, they have a very young population. So I see a lot of the action that we see will come from India.
Riccardo, you mentioned many topics that are of interest, because you concentrated mostly on the future related to rather antitrust policies or non-antitrust policies. What is interesting, you also mentioned the case of TikTok and also the case of Microsoft that was mentioned by Michael before, that basically somehow things keep changing. So Microsoft at some point, was becoming a giga company, and then Instagram, Facebook, then Instagram, and now TikTok. Maybe the evolution, the system is not still stabilized, and there will be probably some a process of adaptation also related to new companies that are growing in India or China or whatever. What I'm scared of is basically I'm scared of the problems related to customers and be small players. Imagine all the world of mom and pop shops in China and in India, that they have shops that let a great chunk of the Chinese and Indian population survive with shops that have $10,000 a year revenue. So if you kill them, if these platforms will kill, there will be also big social problems. If we want to go back to strategy, and there is a question related to strategy, going back also to the topic that was touched by the problems related to Uber and all the issues related to creating a network of drivers that you have to pay to let them survive. Otherwise, the service is not there. And so the more you grow, the more cash you need. Now, there is a question related to how a platform strategy can survive, can become a traditional business model. Suppose, for example, that Uber becomes also a taxi company. I don't know if it's an absurd idea, or do you think it can two totally different business model at some point merge? That's a question coming from the floor.
Right. So Well, so let me address this. And I also see in the chat there's the basic question of what do you mean by a platform approach?
Yeah.
Right. So let's just take an example of a taxi company. So in many ways, taxi companies are not real companies. They're actually, I don't want to quite say they're platforms, but most taxi companies don't actually hire drivers as employees. What they do is they hire owners of taxi cabs, let's say, and they let those taxi cabs drive. But that's a technicality. But so let's say you have a taxi cab service where the company employs all of the drivers and owns all the cars, and then they get calls for rides, and they charge fees to users. So that's what we call a standalone service. The company owns the assets and provides it as a service. A platform is where the company doesn't own automobiles. It doesn't hire drivers as employees. It just tries to match people that have cars and time to drive with the demand side, people that want rides, right? So that's a platform business. They charge a transaction fee. And the more drivers you have, the more riders you will have. The more riders you have, the more drivers you will have. And the pull between the two is the network effect. And so the special value of the platform company comes from the network effect. Now, the problem with a company like Uber, and this goes back to the concept that I've written a lot about, which Riccardo mentioned, of multi-homing versus mono-homing. A platform becomes a home. But if the user can have many different homes and the company can't control the homes, then it's hard to create a monopoly. It's hard to generate powerful network effects. So Uber, for example, cannot control riders because riders will go to other companies like a Lyft, or they'll go to a traditional taxi company, they'll drive themselves, or they'll walk, they'll take a bus, they'll take a subway. So there's many different ways. And so multi-homing is a huge problem for Uber. And so they have to pay drivers to be ready to drive because it's on-demand service that distinguishes them from a traditional taxi. And then they have to discount the rides for the riders so that they will choose Uber. And so it's a bad business model. So that's a case of how a platform differences from what we say a controlled service, but it's not really it's not an effective model for a platform business. The problem, Uber should be located in cities that have a shortage of taxi cabs or a shortage of other transportation options, so they can be more like a single home. In the case of Amazon, they actually can't control you from going to any other digital shopping site. But what they do is they convince you to become a member of Prime, their buyers club. And so you get all sorts of free benefits with Prime, and including free delivery. And so that discourages multi-homing because people don't want to pay twice for things like delivery. So people tend to do most of their shopping on Amazon, and you generally get the lowest prices, and it's very convenient. They have 500 million items. So that's a case where here's another distinguished. For some items, Amazon buys them and resells them. And so in that case, it's not functioning as a platform. It's just a store, like a Walmart. But in other cases, for items that are not in high demand, it doesn't buy them and inventory them and resell them. It just links the buyers and the sellers. And so there, it performs like a platform and charges a transaction fee. So it's another element of complexity. We have these hybrid digital conglomerates that are both standalone product or service businesses, and their platforms linking to market sides. And they may also be innovation platforms and transaction platforms at the same time. Companies build applications in the web services environment of Amazon, which makes them like an operating system, like an innovation platform. So the levels of complexity get really, really high. But there are clear distinctions between what is a standalone product or service business versus what is a platform business that depends on the linkages between two different market actors and the generation of network effects across those. So, it is a new business model that I think we've had in the past, but it's been supercharged by the internet. Actually, in my book, we begin with the story of the Yellow Pages as a kind of platform associated with the telephone. The telephone is one of the first electrical platforms, and the more users you have, more people with telephones, the more valuable the telephone becomes. One person with a telephone has no value. It's like I once tried to find the first person who bought a fax machine. And that's another kind of network technology or platform technology. And my theory was the first person to buy a fax machine must have bought at least two machines. So we have in the world, particularly digital, but it's not only digital. We also saw this with railroads, and we also have seen this with bazaars and shopping places for centuries. We have this kind of network effect across user demand and supply sides for many different areas. And it's been supercharged by the internet, supercharged by digital technology. And we have no choice but to figure out a way on the government side to regulate this. And we have no choice, I think, on the side of companies and entrepreneurs and managers to figure out how to kind of self-regulate without destroying the environment that we work in. So, I just wanted to make it clear that at least, even though the boundaries are quite complicated, there is a difference between creating a product or a service that stands by itself versus creating a business that is also a platform business that relies on this linkage and network effect between two or more market actors.
I would like to, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say one other comment we see in the chat about, say, energy. So we've seen some markets that try to use a platform approach rather than a more of a controlled or regulated service approach in energy, for example. So California and Texas have both set up energy marketplaces where you buy contracts for power generation on demand from different power stations or solar installations. And in the case of California, this was 20 years ago, there was a company, Enron, which tried to create a monopoly of those futures contracts, and the whole marketplace collapsed. And California energy prices went from very low to thousands of dollars per hour. And so there, the market approach or the platform approach turned out to be very, very dangerous for the public because there were bad actors manipulating the system. And then more recently, I guess it was a year or so ago in Texas, which also had a marketplace or platform approach for energy sourcing. That also collapsed when they had a cold spell during the winter, and it froze a lot of the energy installations. And because the contracts were locked up, people had no energy source. So, not everything should be platformized, and we need to think about when is a platform approach useful, both in the private sector or for some public utilities, and when is a more regulated or controlled approach. But there are other platform approaches in energy and climate change that could be very useful, like a smart grid, for example, or the concept of an energy marketplace, where we have technologies kind of sorting through demand and supply and trying to optimize both sides, which is, again, it's a natural platform. We very well could see new kinds of energy platforms occur. To some extent, we already see them emerging for batteries and recharging of electric vehicles. That is a platform chicken and egg problem, that's a common issue, but also possibly for nuclear power or fusion power, solar power, wind power. They lend themselves naturally to a demand supply marketplace type of activity. But we have to be careful to make sure that the supply is there. And there's no easy way to do that. Anyway, that was just a comment in the chat.
Riccardo, Michael, he's joining us soon. So I see that you're wearing I wanted to give the floor to Riccardo, and let me go again to you. I see that you're wearing MIT RIP
right.
jacket. MIT RIP is a program from MIT which works on the creation of regional entrepreneurship ecosystems. So Riccardo, this was a question I would have done also to you, and is regards the role of platforms in fostering regional innovation system. Also because at some point you both mentioned platforms as meta organizations. So can a platform become a tool that supports a region or an area, large area like Cambridge or Napoli in our case, or Roma or Milan, for the creation of a regional innovation system? This question is also for Riccardo, because Riccardo has also a role as an entrepreneur in our region.
Well,
so maybe I don't know.
Just jump in though and add though, from what we see, something like about 40% or 50% of new business ideas that we see, even among unicorns, are actually platform businesses, or they're product or service businesses with a strong platform element to it, like a product with a social media element to it, or a product with an open innovation app store kind of addition to it. So there's no question that platforms are of great interest to entrepreneurs, and we teach about them in our entrepreneurship program. And they have a potentially large role in economic development. On the bad side, though, as Riccardo was also talking about, and it's also in the chat, a company like Amazon could be so large, they could facilitate small entrepreneurs selling their products and services over that common platform, right? Rather than being a store. But if they become the only channel, then they become too controlling, too powerful, and they make it very difficult for small businesses to make any money selling on Amazon, because their advertising charges and their fulfillment charges are so high. So there's a negative and a positive to what they do. Sorry, Riccardo.
Riccardo, please.
Yeah, no, very clearly it can, and the vehicle is education. If you have today 30, 40, 50,000 kids, they're good at doing development on the e-commerce platform like Shopify or Kumo or Magento, we could hire them in a minute. So if we embed in our education system the capability to use this very powerful tool that are the platform, yes, we build a lot of job and we sort of instigate entrepreneurship, which is a very important driver for wealth and regional social development. So not directly, but yes, indirectly. Just one more comment about what Michael was saying before, and is related to the concept of investment. The fact that the biggest hospitality company in the world have not even one room, the fact that the biggest transportation company have not even one bus or one truck or one car, that's bringing in a sense of injustice and is risking of preventing investment. Some time ago, there was a big debate in Europe about a virtual network operator. Someone comes in and can launch a mobile communication service without infrastructure. And the people that say, okay, we hired thousands of people, we invest billions and billions, we took up huge risk, and we made the infrastructure, and then someone will come in with no investment and makes a competition. The people in the transportation industry were complaining about Flixbus. Flixbus is a bus service, and again, is a platform. So they did not invest in drivers, did not invest in the trucks. And the people that built in decades a fleet of thousands of buses and hired thousands of drivers and took huge risks. Say, wait a minute. I put up all the investment, now someone comes in and bring me in competition without taking risk, without the investment. So this is another limitation to the platform, where we get to the point where the platform is so big and strong that the underlying investment is not sustainable. That is when also the economy somehow adjusts itself, hopefully.
Right. But you have to remember that, like most startups, most platform businesses fail.
Yeah, a lot of them.
So, and actually in our survey of companies that became global public platforms, we identified 43 at that time, but we also identified 209 failures. So the success rate was about 17%. And that's kind of lower. That's lower than what we see even coming out of startups from MIT and Harvard. Although that 17% number, those were very successful platforms, but the others had all disappeared, failed, or been absorbed, or gone bankrupt. So just creating a platform is no guarantee that you're going to be big and successful. You still have to have a value proposition, and you still have to be able to make money most of the time. A company like Uber has never made a dollar, right? It's just lost billions and billions of dollars. It's been a massive transfer of wealth from venture capital community and then individual investors to essentially riders and drivers. So we benefited from Uber.
I agree.
But in the other cases where, say, a telecom operator comes in without any infrastructure, they still have to pay for services, right? Mm-hmm. So if they're undercharging their users for those services and they're just constantly running a deficit, and they're using what we call subsidies to solve the chicken and egg problem. Chicken and egg is, how do you get users? How do you get the supply side? You have a demand and supply side. Usually one side you have to make free or subsidize it to draw the other side in. But if you're just underpricing your service using a marketplace concept, you're going to eventually go out of money unless you have investors that are willing to just
very patient,
billions and billions of dollars. Now, unfortunately, Amazon is the model that people often think of, because Amazon lost money for like 15 years, close to 20 years, and then they finally made billions and billions of dollars. Although I think they lost money in the last year as the sales went down after COVID. But so Amazon is the model of investing for 15, 20 years, and then eventually you've captured the whole market. But that's pretty rare. There aren't many cases where that occurs. And there are other platform companies like Microsoft or Google or Facebook, which made money from day one almost, because they were essentially pure digital businesses. And the marginal cost of reproducing a digital product or a digital service is close to zero. You need infrastructure, but the problem that Amazon had was they actually built physical warehouses. They built an air force essentially to move product around the world. They built a fleet of trucks. They built the equivalent of the U.S. Post Office. So they built all that physical infrastructure, which really violates the concept of being a digital platform. So they're really not.
No, they're not a digital platform.
They're not a pure digital platform. They make all their money from a digital business, which is Amazon Web Services, and from transaction fees on the platform, and a little bit of margin on sales. But they're really not a good example. I think companies like Tencent and Google are actually better examples of digital platforms, or TikTok, which comes out of nowhere to be the most used website in the world, basically linking this concept of an influencer with companies, and then with end users, the average people. So it was a kind of a unique concept. We'd seen it before on YouTube and Facebook, but nothing like TikTok has done. By the way, the United States government has just declared TikTok kind of an enemy of the people. So they're going to be restricting usage of TikTok in the United States. So that's another political complexity that has entered because the US government doesn't like a Chinese company collecting so much information on American users. And that will depress network effects and depress the value of TikTok, which is owned by a company called ByteDance. And they are a unicorn. They're the most valuable unicorn, by the way. I have a study going on of unicorns and unicorn platforms. And their value has probably doubled in the last year, whereas most other unicorns
drop, yeah.
Value has probably dropped.
They're preparing for the IPO.
Yeah, but the US political restrictions will have some impact on their value as well. So, we don't live in a pure technology world. We live in a world of politics in many ways, as well as economics, driving what we do.
We have just maybe one last round, and then we are approaching the end of this meeting. There were a few questions regarding artificial intelligence and sustainability issues, because one of the critics, which is often referred to platform economy, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, is that they are a disaster, environmental disaster on one side. On the other side, artificial intelligence is sometimes considered a potential tool to reduce the impact of climate change. I don't know if you have a comment about this. The last brief comment.
Well, I made a quick comment that we can use platforms and marketplaces to regulate demand and supply of energy, or to use smart technology, smart grids, for example. So there are a lot of potential advantages there. But the biggest negative, I guess, against the environment has been Bitcoin, right, which uses up as much energy as many major countries. And that's just a complete total waste of energy as well as value. The other energy usage of data centers by these massive platforms is, I guess it's a little worrisome because there's so much data being generated and it is being captured. But generally, companies like Google and Microsoft and Alibaba, they found places to locate their data centers with pretty low cost energy, like next to a giant waterfall, or they're building huge solar panel sites. So I think they're concerned about sustainability, but it's been Bitcoin, which is not, but Ethereum has a lighter version of crypto, which is not so energy intensive. It may not be as secure, but that's, again, it's kind of a secondary problem, the sustainability issue, I think. I think we'll manage it.
Riccardo, oh, sorry.
I agree that digital can be also a massive support to sustainability. You can reduce food waste, you can reduce usage of water. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, will be a very big allied factor to reducing the waste of energy and water and all the natural resources. Of course, today, my kid playing on the PlayStation with someone in Australia generates more pollution than a coal stove. But I hope this is fading away because I think, this is, humanity has come to a point in which now everybody is becoming very serious. Greenwashing is over. I see company taking very seriously the carbon footprint, and I'm pretty sure, as an optimist and a believer in the value of technology, I'm pretty sure in the next 20 years we will see digital and artificial intelligence becoming a very important factor to enhance sustainability.
Well, think of all the energy saving that having a video conference has saved, right? Instead of me
moving around
Italy and hundreds of people getting on airplanes or driving to Naples, we have a video conference, and that's going on all around the world every day. And that's a huge, huge savings, right?
Thank you, my friends. I can say that I want to thank also my colleagues from Uniparthenope, Franco Calza, Michele Simoni, Eva Panetti, Nicola Massarotti, Francesco Caramia. I want to mention also the team from MIT team, Stuart Krassel, David Capodilupo, who is responsible for the global programs, Marco De Paola, Jacqueline Taylor. This is the team that cooperate in all of our projects. I think that it has been really enlightening, this meeting tonight, because we have seen different perspectives. It has been also interesting, the vision of the platform economy brought by Michael, and also the ideas that Riccardo has brought, not only business ideas, from the manager's perspective, but also some hot topics related to the control power of some of these platforms. So basically, the future is always a question mark. But what we maybe can be sure at the end of today is that we don't expect a platform that will take all, but hopefully more platforms will take more, but not all. So thank you so much for your time, and it has been great for me, and I hope also for our audience. And we will have a new meeting on the 20th of January with Bill Howlett, will be our expert from MIT Sloan, and so I hope you will join also for next time. Thank you so much. Ciao, Riccardo.
Thank you. Ciao, grazie. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Riccardo.
Ciao.
Good to see you. Okay, bye-bye.